very, very happy to bring to you my friend Alexandra Martin. She's a curator of digital arts and coordinator of the 1P1 lab and a doctoral candidate in the literary studies area at the University of Quebec in Montreal. Her dissertation, which she's working on currently, I think she's been hunkering down to get it finished lately, is entitled Memory and Obsolescence: Encountering the Past in Digital Art. Her research focuses on obsolescence, vintage tech, and contemporary web practices. She and I and Andrew co-presented at the Electronic Literature Organization 2025 in the area of VR. So she's very focused on VR right now. From 23 to 24, she was coordinator of multimodal media literacy group. From in 2020 to 2023, the assistant coordinator of Canada Research Chair in Digital Arts and Literature. So she was working directly under Bertrand Gervais, my colleague there at UQAM. Together, she and I have curated 3 exhibitions, Art Intelligent, Ekphrasis, and Transcreation. She's also done many of her own, including Faces of Resilience in 2020. And so I'm very, very excited about bringing Alexandra to us. And good morning, Jimmy. All right.
Good
Welcome.
morning. Thank you. So are we ready to get started?
Yes.
Perfect. So I'm going to share a slideshow with you all. Let me see if I can get it to let me see my notes, and if not, that's all right. I have my backup. All right.
Perfect.
So good morning, good afternoon, good day, depending on where you all are. To everyone, it's still technically morning for me. But firstly, I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank Froda and Dene for the very generous invitation to meet and to present the 1P1 laboratory with you all today. As Dene mentioned, I am the research coordinator for 1P1 since we received our grant in May of 2024. Can anyone confirm for me as well that the volume is working well? Yep, perfect.
Yes.
Wonderful. I'm also a doctoral candidate in literary studies, as Dene mentioned. With one hand, I'm presenting to you today. With the other hand, I'm typing up my final chapter. And my focus of work is really, even though I'm in literary studies, is technically more in media archaeology and semiotics. And then before I worked with the LMM, the Multimodal Media Literacy Research Group, and the Canada Research Chair Digital Arts and Literatures, both of which had their home at the Laboratoire NT2, the NT2 laboratory at UQAM. And I mention this just because that in the past year or so, since we've gotten the new grant, there's been a little bit of confusion after almost 3 decades of NT2. So what is 1P1? Does NT2 still exist? And the answer, the clarification really is that 1P1 is this inheritor of NT2, which still exists as a legacy infrastructure. So we still support the various databases. If you're familiar with the Répertoire des œuvres hypermédiatiques, the hypermedia works repertoire, and many other projects as well that were directed under Bertrand Gervais, who officially retired from his full professor position at the beginning of the year, but is still very, very active. Bertrand is also involved in 1P1, and this new research infrastructure has overtaken is now occupying the physical spaces and has taken inherited the equipment that we had before. So if you're wondering, if you're part of the group of people wondering what happened to NT2, we're still here. We still exist. We're just part of this new, larger infrastructure, improved, bringing in the newest technological frontier of extended realities. So today I'm going to present the infrastructure of our research entity, from human resources to physical resources, as well as the different types of research that have been taking place in the past year since we received our funding in May of 2024. First things first, we are the primary 1P1 entity is a grant from the Canada Foundation for Innovation, or CFI, a nonprofit corporation investing in research infrastructures at Canadian research institutions. I should mention that is not exclusive to universities, but any research institution is eligible to apply. So these funds are intended exclusively for the development, building, and initial establishment of infrastructures. This is not money that we can spend on funding. This is truly funds for the research bodies within which professors, students, artists, etc. work. So this is the same type of grant fund that, if you're familiar with NT2's history, was used to establish the Laboratoire NT2, which was one of the first labs of its kind to have a physical space for arts and literatures rather than for pure sciences in the Canadian academic sphere. So today, of course, we work with much more than just textualities, which was the basis of NT2, and we put this enormous resource to use in various fields of research and intrigue. We have three co-directors of the laboratory. Martin Lalonde, who is the principal director and a professor in the School of Media and Visual Arts here at UQAM. We have Nathalie Lasselle, who is a professor in the Department of Language Didactics, also at UQAM, and who was the founder of is the founder of the Multimodal Media Literacy Research Group. So they're really, Martin also works in arts education. So there's really an axis towards education with two of the specialties that we have. But then we also have Bertrand Gervais, like I mentioned, retired, but still very, very active from the Department of Literary Studies as co-founder and co-PI. The team includes other researchers, and I'll cover a little bit of their work that I'll review towards the end of the presentation, along with a whole fleet of graduate researchers at the master's and PhD levels, often working on projects that are directly related to their own theses or dissertations, or sometimes simply contracted onto a project that they find interesting because we think it's important, we think it's crucial to provide the opportunity in this lab for early career researchers to branch out and try different things. And we've actually had some really interesting results because of that. Another important member is of our team is Trebuchet, which is a Montreal-based video game company, and they are our industry partner in programming and development. So we do have students and members of our team who do their own development in extended realities, but we work directly with specialists as well, and they do have an access towards research. So while if we were to develop any devices or any experiences with Trebuchet, they do belong to the research community and Trebuchet communally. So this is not to create, we will not be creating private content that would then be sold. And then the person I wanted to make sure that I did include it in my slide. Perfect. Is Guillaume Perrauroy. He's the person from Trebuchet that we work with most closely and who also presents his own research and is lately especially interested in testing and learning moral codes, physical codes of interaction using virtual reality. So we're excited to see what he works with some researchers at UPenn. The main mandates of the lab are grouped under three different axes. The first one being what we call in French recherche-création, or practice-led research, and the responsible member is Martin Lalonde. And so here I've got a little bit of a block of text, so if you'll bear with me. While in the arts, practice-led research mainly aims to put emerging technology or technical resources at the service of creation with an interdisciplinary approach in art, science, and technology, it represents a strategic place to rethink more generally the modes of work organization and the modes of knowledge production. This methodology links the constructivist nature of the artistic creation process to the analytical and systemic properties of a research approach. Focus on artistic production, its contributions take the form of works, experiments, performances, devices, or creative tools, and generate knowledge and expertise on the processes producing the works. At 1P1, production processes aim to generate works and by extension, new applications and uses for XR technologies in art, education, and communication. We work iteratively between the phases of creation and exploration and analysis of these experiential objects. The creations mark out analytical and interpretive paths to guide researchers in their study of the complexity of the phenomena under investigation. And so this link between creation and research involves the implementation of technological advances where art allows the condition of the experience of and with the device to be proposed. The first of the three groups in this initial groupings of activities, in this initial acts, focus on the spatialization of the virtual environment and the ambulatory nature of XR experiences. I will talk a little bit more in detail about the physical spaces that we have in order to deploy these different experimentations. But for now, I'll mention that we're creating distinct isomorphic environments in virtual realities, extended realities as well. But these prototypes constitute virtual environments in which members of the lab are invited to perform simple tasks, moving from point A to B, touching the floors, touching the walls, sitting in a chair, sitting in front of a table, opening a door, different interactive elements as well, so that we can allow our team to test and explore the parameters of the technical challenges of this type of experiment in terms of coding and software. Excuse me. Our smog pollution today is quite bad because of some forest fires, so bear with me. And so this is the step that we really work heavily with Trebuchet, and their team comes to our spaces, and we work integratively as an interdisciplinary team. Different aesthetics and representation techniques are explored and tested in virtual mixed and augmented reality to determine which methods are the most effective in terms of production and programming. The second phase, so A2, would be creative activities in the form of especially collaborative creative residency programs for artist researchers, not only from the laboratory and from the Faculty of Arts, as well as their research teams, but from elsewhere once we can afford it. Coordinating the allocation of the library's resources, spaces, time slots in separate teams work simultaneously designing, producing, and testing different types of XR works. The third one, the final for this axe, would be the exhibition and dissemination of XR works, which constitutes a distinct technical stage in the process of the production. Physical and technical conditions of the dissemination context, the spaces, and the target audiences represent, for creators, elements to be integrated into the stages of project implementation. This third phase of activities focuses on the deployment and reception as well of XR experiences in the lab space, where they were designed, but also elsewhere. So in outdoor public spaces, in exhibition spaces, in gallery spaces, or even in indoor common areas of our university. We're actually working directly with some members of the urban development program at UQAM to create for next year several outdoor experiences. And one thing that we have as a particular technical difficulty in Canada is that half of our year is winter. And so we have to we have to actually, look at these very practical questions of what can survive outside if we wanted it to be a if not a permanent installation, that at least something that has some sort of durability beyond the summer months. Because even, the half of the year that we call summer, well, it's really 3 months of summer, and we still have a few other months where the weather can be quite questionable. Um, yes, so we will moving right along to our second axe, which is research design or design-led research, recherche design or design-led research, led by Nathalie Lasselle. And this is for the moment, the axe that is most closely associated to education and pedagogical development. This involves mixed iterative collaborative methodologies. In education, it aims to study how the integration of new devices, in this case XR environments, transforms the phenomena of teaching and learning. So by collaborating on the development of pedagogical innovations and the design of educational interventions in XR, practical solutions to real-world problems are sought. While collaborative design work allows researchers to base their interventions on theoretical principles of teaching and learning, it also allows practitioners to consider the specific conditions and contingencies of their environment. As in research creation, studying the processes of designing and implementing educational designs in the field allows researchers to theorize about the nature and affordances of new learning and teaching environments created by the integration of innovative technological devices. It also allows them to consider educational actions to be implemented in educational settings. The objectives of this cycle then are to produce, study, deploy in educational as well as cultural contexts, pedagogical innovations that make use of XR and its spatial, interactive, avatar features, and more in order to meet learning needs and challenges of training young audiences in digital technology. And as I'm reading that sentence, it occurs to me that I say in training young audiences, but this is, we are working with multiple sectors, and I'll talk a little bit more about this as well. But we'll be working with the Bibliothèque and archives, the Library and Archives of Quebec. And so when we think of educational context, we are often thinking about adolescence and youth. But there is also higher education. There's also here in Quebec, we have a system that resembles the UK system, where we have 2 years of college before you have university. So we have young adults as well. So we have multiple different sectors and different educational goals as well within these contexts that we'll be looking at. And we are going to be working with we are already working with publics of varied backgrounds. Like an educational kit, this material that we provide includes everything needed to conduct educational activities, worksheets, teaching, intervention, assessments, explanatory slideshows, demonstrations, technical procedural manuals, educational posters, text-based, video-based, and other tutorials. So this is really a practical outreach and not just for those of us who are researching in didactics. We are creating an analysis grid to identify based on semiotic, subjective, aesthetic, and haptic skills to be mobilized the relevant uses of the infrastructure for training young audiences. We identify in XR creations, produce the most complex functionalities to master in relation to the identified skills. In a third step, a sample of teenagers is invited to our space to experience the creations in order to test the analysis grid and allow them to make necessary adjustments. The second grouping of activities within this second axe is the implementation of an XR experiment aimed at young audiences based on the works produced in the first collaborative residency program in the first section, as well as on the conceptual frameworks in research creation and digital aesthetics, so the third axe, which are carried out in parallel to these activities. So this conceptual adjustment prepares researchers to observe and interpret the skills identified and establish protocol for supporting and studying school groups, which is a particular public to work with. The 1P1 laboratory welcomes school students in groups, one class at a time with their teachers. So subgroups will take turns experimenting the work in XR, and I'll show you the space in which this will be taking place, while the rest of the group observes and comments on their classmates' experience from an analysis room, which is adjacent to the technical space. We compile this data on their experience, both technical and educational data, which comes from motion capture, audiovisual recordings of the XR experiences, video documentation, and create graphs of experiential trajectories and interactions between participants, frequency of wandering errors, et cetera, et cetera. I will skip a little bit of the details on how we record these, but our researchers conducted then a cross-analysis of data coded in B2, so this qualitative and quantitative data according to the objectives of all three of our cycles of activities. So to give you an example, data on metagestural skills of younger participants is analyzed according to technical programming choices and technosemiotic inferences, which are generated within the other cycles. This data can provide insights guiding the deployment of XR isomorphic experiences in school and cultural contexts, and contribute to theoretical and critical production on the XR experience in artistic creation and educational practices. These collaborations with the school groups, they do take place one at a time, and we'll be starting them this year. We have already 3 confirmed classes that we'll be working with and almost a 4th one.
I have
Yes,
a
Dee.
question. So just
Yeah.
to bring this into some sort of connection with what we're interested here, which is great, is you're working with young people, and you're working specifically with XR and other media types.
Mhm.
Are you working with? I know you probably have to have a human go through your research group on campus to make sure that you can work with kids. But are you finding that they prefer standing? We're talking about standing and sitting and ambulatory. Like what are you learning in this work that you're doing about working with young people in XR?
Um, so firstly, we have not yet received a group because our space is being built. This past year, we spent most of our time for that specific cycle working on our ethics certification. As you mentioned, we have a very
Yeah.
robust ethics certification so that we can work with children. What we
Yeah.
have seen so far, as far regarding ambulatory desires of the students, I would say it isn't always easy to tell them 12 of you are going to take part in the activity and the other 12 of you have to wait. That is something that does have to be managed because we've done some AR work with students, especially with younger groups that can't wear their headsets. But the important thing there is that we're working directly with the instructor, with the teacher. And so not only do they know their group better than we do and know better how to manage this sort of division of activities, and patience between the groups, but they're developing their own strategies for doing so for that later on when they can bring this sort of technology directly into their classroom and not be in our space specifically. They're developing their own strategies for this. So the answer is that it's in the works. I don't have the specific answer right now, but it's in the works, yeah.
Frodo is asking in the chat, what ages are you anticipating working with?
So the for the virtual reality with actual headsets, adolescents and above. So I think in Quebec, well, it might be recommended 12 and over, but we're working with 14 and over. However, we have one immersive sound project, and obviously because it doesn't require the headset visual, that project, that device that's being developed is not yet tied to a specific fieldwork site. And so if a younger group, if a teacher with younger students offers themselves for the project, then we would probably deploy that kind of experience or the AR with them, and we can work with younger students.
And Frodo has his hand up. Frodo?
But my concern is just, even though my son, who's now 8, has been in twice, if children get into VR too early, there's some research, I believe, that says that their sense of space may be impacted on this.
Mhm.
And it's one thing to do it in the lab. The problem is if it gets cool and the parents have a headset, and not only they become addicted to iPads and all of that stuff, but also to headsets. So I'm glad you're doing older students. So thank you for that.
No, yeah, of course. Well, and I mean, it's also a developmental question as well because it can have a direct impact on eyesight, not only on their concepts of spatialization, as you mentioned. So no, it absolutely, and this is something that was covered well before we submitted our ethics certification application, but this was a major concern for them, and also just um, explaining to them what it is that they'll be experiencing because we are working with we're working with some schools that, to be quite frank, the students come from some relative level of privilege and they might have access to or might have already experienced some XR, some virtual reality. Maybe they have a headset at home, but we also have some schools where the context is not at all the same. And a lot of these students might not have had any access to this and they might have only seen representations of it, tertiary, secondary sort of representations of it. And so there is a level of mediation and responsibility that we need to move forward with this. So absolutely agree. Are there other questions about the educational before I move on to the third acts?
I think you can go ahead. I think we've covered that.
Wonderful. And please feel free to keep raising your hands. I'm sorry if I didn't notice you earlier.
Well,
Our
it's my job to find
okay.
it.
So our third axe is related to digital aesthetics. This is an axe that works under Bertrand Gervais. And I should mention as well, we have responsible members for each of the axes, but we really are quite an integrated team. I don't know of a single, even graduate assistant that is only working on one axe. We're generally all together for these iterative processes that are really happening in parallel to each other, especially this third perspective, where we reflect on the experience, interpretation, and even appreciation of the productions made possible. So hypermedia works, digital creations, XR predictions would be at the heart of this approach. Digital aesthetics are based on semiotics, applied and adapted to the very specific field of our experience of digital productions. Inspired by info aesthetics, Digital aesthetics describe the experience and reception of works that unfold in a culture where connected screens and technical devices play the role of media, giving rise to new practices and habits. They focus on the media semiotic and symbolic dimensions of works and tend to multiply the objects considered and practices studied in order to broaden the spectrum of analysis and enable the production of dynamic inferences and interpretations. This third cycle of activities is carried out in parallel with cycles A and B and formulates theoretical interpretations in art education and digital aesthetics of the impact of these advances on the concepts of presence, corporeality, user experience, and even more broadly on parameters of representation in the world with these new devices. Let's see, skip a little bit of that. So, of the three main activities that we have grouped under this axe, the first one would be the 1P1 collection, which brings together technologies and projects mobilizing the links between the real space and virtual space through XR or metaverses, hypermedia works, installations, augmented cinema, video games, assisted walks, and scrolls, geolocation projects, etc. And I call it the 1P1 collection, but it really can also be a directory because we're working on glossary resources that would be part of the like a general toolkit for educators or cultural mediators within like a library or a gallery space. We've designed the collection in the same way as the Répertoire des arts et des littératures hypermédiatiques, so the Directory of Hypermedia Arts and Literatures, designed by NT2, which has been online since 2005. And it will be, when it's published in the 1P1, it will be an open access database identifying works, years of creation, artists, production companies, and other technical data and descriptive data as well. Jamie, yes.
Can you say a few, could you say a few more words about the glossary? Because I do work in this area, but I've also, most of my work is in glossaries.
Oh, okay. So essentially we have two challenges with the glossaries. One, we want to create a glossary that is accessible to our public that is working more in educational interventions, so
Mm.
outside of the scientific field. That's one glossary project that we're working on. The other glossary project and obstacle that we've identified is that we are a francophone research organization. And this technology is so new that most of the theorization is in English and most of the vocabulary is in English. So when I say something like embodiment, which is something that we've already discussed, that is already like commonly discussed in XR context, and we want to translate it to French, we actually have a lot of issues with the term embodiment. We
Yeah,
can say corporeité, which is corporalities.
yeah.
Some people will say embodiment
Oh,
to
yes.
with it.
It's,
Um,
I worked with the federal government doing technical translation for AI words and other computer words some years ago. And mostly they gave me stuff and said, here's a translation of the English into the Brazilian and back into English, and what do you think?
mhm.
So I realized how complicated it is, and I had of course, a PhD student who worked on this stuff in recommender systems. But I'm wondering specifically about glossaries. Are you creating the glossaries? Are the teachers editing the glossaries? Are the students editing the glossaries? And how structured are they? Because the kind of glossary, one of the things I did with glossaries was I talked about categories. You could say there's this word, but you can compare it with this other term,
Mhm.
which is similar but different, and both of these terms give rise to a meta term, and so
Mhm.
on. But my glossaries were at that time for individuals.
Okay, I see. Yes, so at the moment, our glossary work is a large compiled list shared amongst the team in an Excel format where we can also link between the cells to point out exactly like these meta-referential and umbrella
Mhm.
classifications.
Right.
Um, and then in its public facing interface, it will include a taxonomy that could allow us to classify the different entries, much like you're mentioning, either by groupings and associations, or even by by like technical difficulties in the translation itself. If there is, if we would choose to include, just to use my example that I had previously, embodiment and corporeality, we might both link them both to corporeité. Um, there's also there's a question too, because we will at a certain point have to translate some things, especially for the glossary that's going to be more for the educators. We're going to have to translate some things in a way that doesn't really, for us in, more scientific mindset and goals, might not necessarily be the most appropriate. And that's why we think it's really important to divide these two resources, toolkits. One is for everyone in kind of
Yeah,
working with
I think so.
the, yeah.
I had a just to divert for a moment. I had a student years ago, now at W3C, working on security. And the major result from that thesis was that the terms we use for security words are not the terms that the general public uses.
Yeah.
So we talk about push notification and pull notification, and they had completely different concepts of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's all of it is fascinating. I'm sorry to have taken so much time away from the main.
Oh, not at all, not at all. And I'm glad to know that you are working on glossaries too, because, well, like I said, we're
Well, I'm
primarily
doing glossaries and
having a
I'm doing.
francophone resource, but
Yeah, I
we
might,
don't.
I'm only at niveau A2 for français, so I definitely couldn't help with the glossary. But I do work also in presenting artworks. Like if you've seen Kent Monkman's gigantic Mischief's Wet Dream at the Art Gallery Nova Scotia, or any of his really big works, that was the original inspiration. Was doing a VR or an XR, some sort of some no, it would be augmented reality for this painting, with glossary, with comments, with all sorts of stuff like that.
Mhm, mhm.
And that work is ongoing. And in fact, I need to talk to someone from the UK because there's you might have heard of it, a new Canada UK grant program using AI, and it fits exactly with this project. But we'll talk more
That
later.
sounds good. Frodo has his hand up. Frodo?
As an English speaker, native Norwegian, but in the work English speaker, I think the importance of having it in French is really, really big. And the reason for that is for the reason we do this project. We need more perspectives, and by having slightly different languages, having slightly different ways of expressing what's going on is absolutely important. So just wanted to put two thumbs up for that.
Thank you.
I think you can go ahead, Alexandra.
All right. Let me skim through. So the 1P1 collection is sort of the nucleus of what Bertrand Gervais calls des environnements de recherche et de connaissance, so research and knowledge environments. Meaning that the site and the public interface that the 1P1 collection will be hosted on is not just going to be a site of this directory that you can cycle through, and maybe you can consult the glossary or you can consult the different documentations of the artworks. And I will talk a little bit more in detail about the documentations of the XR experiences. But will also be a place for like a virtual workspace so that we can publish and document other practices. We've had blog sites that have been quite successful that also led to, greater contributions and eventually to journal volume contributions. So this is the kind of space that we're building, that we've started building this past year, and that will encompass the greater 1P1 collection. Once these two avenues, so the collection and as well as the environment, the research ecosystem, have been completed, we want to explore two avenues. So how can the digital ecosystem be developed in the contemporary world using the possibilities offered by XR? And can the ecosystem be three-dimensionalized to promote new avenues of interpretation? And secondly, how can the 1P1 laboratory invest itself into the network of highly qualified research professionals and communities interested in XR in order to experiment with original forms of research and knowledge mobilization on the contemporary imagination? Can we create an XR space for documentary research by creating an XR consultation room? It is possible to envision research in an XR environment in digital humanities and culture, digital literacy, environmental humanities, and documentary research. The creation of the 1P1 laboratory provides this infrastructure and the research creation programming to make it happen. I mentioned a lot the space earlier, which is currently under construction. And I am quite happy to actually be across the street from where it's under construction because I don't have to be right next to all of that dust. We were originally going to be in the building that we're in right now, and there was a bit of a institutional shakeup, and we are moving across the street once it's finished building. But it's great because we're going to have this whole space that is just for us. So as you can see here, I've got two spaces outlined in blue, and there's been quite a few changes on here, so it's been a bit patchwork together. I apologize if it's not super legible. So the CFI grant that we have is being spent on putting this into place. We have got a isomorphic space large enough for groups of up to 15 simultaneous users to interact with each other in virtual reality. Probably more, but we're going to limit it to 15, especially when it comes to adolescents. Sometimes they get a little too excited. This space includes not only the headsets for the groups, but also the motion sensor tracking and capture the data capabilities necessary for the various research projects in our network. Just next to that space, we have the analysis room, which on a regular day is like a meeting room. It just has a table and a screen, a really nice big screen for us to do meetings at. But on fancy days, it's the place where our team observes the folks who are in the isomorphic space, or where we receive the school children, and then the half of the group that is observing while the others are experimenting will be while they watch, and we can see directly what's happening. We will be able to see what's happening in the room across the board, but we'll also be able to isolate to individual users. We will have several programming computers on movable stands as well, so that can allow us to remediate the space as necessary, provide on-the-spot adjustments to devices or experiences. And Trebuchet is really eager about this. That's what's interesting to work with the industry and cultural sectors here in Montreal, is that we will be the first and only public isomorphic XR space in Montreal. The Phi Center, which I'm not sure if you're familiar, the Phi Center in Montreal is a big pillar of the artistic community here, especially in the technological arts, the immersive arts. And they were just absolutely flabbergasted that we will have this space and they'll be able to come use it, because right now they have to go to the video game industry, the private sector, and they have to rent spaces. The issue isn't so much money, but it is the use of a space in the private sector. They would love to invest the public if at all possible. So this is what has been happening this whole past year as far as being built. And then as far as our actual activities that we've been working on during this, the multiple delays in construction that we've experienced, we established the research group in extended realities in arts and in education. You are welcome and you are invited. I just caveat the group is in French, and it does take place on Mondays in the evenings. So I know that time zones and linguistic questions are of matter here. But the interdisciplinary research group meets bi-weekly, mostly throughout the academic year. We're on hiatus in the summer. We tend to propose readings ahead of time, then discussed and predetermined by a lead for the subject in question. We also receive speakers from academia, from the industry. So also, if that is something that interests any of you, we are happy to take proposals as well. And we have not yet finalized our program for 2025, 26. So I will, there would be room actually. We're also developing a series of workshops and training sessions that would be held either during the research groups as well, if it's something that interests the entire group, or at other times. Right now, we've already got some workshops on Gaussian splat and photogrammetry. I have trouble in English with that one, upcoming in the fall session, and then more topics in works. And as soon as they're confirmed, they'll be announced. In June 2024, then June 2025, we held what we call a speed colloque, or speed conferences, where members of the team and external researchers are invited to present their works, their research or creative work related to XR in 5 minutes or less. This year's edition also included an exhibition space with contributing artists from our team, and we'll definitely be hosting another iteration of this event in 2026. Do let me know if you're interested. And we've had presentations in English at both of these events as well, even if most of the presentations occur in French. Most of the public, the audience, are very English proficient, so that's not an issue at all. But despite it being only a 5-minute presentation formula, it is difficult, obviously, to get really deep into your research. But as we're a newer infrastructure, and I don't know if it's the same in your various institutions, but we have a lot of communication issues between like our faculties and our departments, and people don't know what we do. And so the event is really designed as a networking opportunity where we will meet people who we didn't even know where, we actually we're developing a partnership with the BANQ, the Library and Archives of Quebec. And we met somebody else from BANQ at our event this year who had no clue that we were already developing something with someone from their own organization already. And so it's really this place for networking, for visibility. And it's a 1-day event, and it's gone really well. So like I said, we'll definitely be holding it again in 2026. We have Martha Lalonde, who holds a grant from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada for a project entitled Potentiel, limitation et enjeux des dispositifs technologiques de réalité étendue en enseignement des arts et des langues. This is our functioning grant for those fieldwork sites that I mentioned earlier. We'll be working with different groups. With different student groups, directly working with the teachers of plastic, multimedia arts, as well as French teachers, all in Quebec, to design tools and experiences in VR, AR, and mixed realities with the goal of facilitating, educating, and promoting the integration of these technologies into the academic curriculum. So this is our Acts 2, our research intervention, where we come in and we create designs to respond to a real world problem. We also have the Jour J, or the J Days, which is an initiative started by 2 of our student members, Pacify Leclerc and Dora Claude. This is a weekly series where they explore digital creation, game, and role play in a ludic and laid-back environment. This past year it was always held on Thursdays. I believe it's going to be the same. It's generally in person, but from my understanding that there can be some online participation. And then we've been working heavily on the Collection Ampéon, the 1P1 collection that I mentioned earlier, notably determining our methodologies, our taxonomies, our vocabularies, where we then realize, oh, we definitely need to develop a glossary, and where we then realize, oh, we definitely need to develop 2 glossaries, actually. This collection will house documentations of extended reality experiences and will be available online, not yet, but it will be. And so we've been designing, testing, and tweaking our documentation methodology. I can show you actually a link. For now, we're working with a Microsoft form. It's not the final form of this, but for the summer, while we're accumulating a bunch of documentations, we have a group of 6 research students completing between 5 to 10 documentations of their own, with the goal of launching the site by the end of the fall semester with a consequential amount of documentations already completed. And this database will, of course, be fed and improved and tweaked as we move along, much like the hypermedia directory that NT2 ran for at least 20 years. And
Alexandra, there's a couple of comments in the chat. Peter Wasalko is asking, is there a smart glass window between the rooms, and do you have a YouTube channel?
No and no. No, there's not a smart glass window between the rooms, but we have a large screen. That way we can decide between wanting to have a global view of all the participants, or even changing perspectives, or then, like I said, changing to individual headset view. Do we have a YouTube? Also, windows are really expensive to install on interior walls. Do we have a YouTube channel? No, but potentially one day. And it really, for that, would depend on things like what we would, well, it would be easy for us to diffuse like our presentations that we do at the 1P1, the speed conference, for example. But for the recording participants in the ambulatory space, we have ethics questions. For minors, the answer is absolutely not. We will not. If we needed to, I think we can use clips from that to diffuse, and then of course their faces, as much as possible, are blurred.
There's another question from Fabienne. Do you use XR as tooling within the lab, not as an object of study, but as part of your workflow?
The answer for that would be depends. There are people who do. Several of the team members absolutely do, and I'll talk a little bit about their work, and I can give you their contacts as well if you're more interested. But as far as in our current documentation practices, specifically the different works that we've progressed on this past year, not yet.
Thank you.
No problem. And I'm actually going to exit out of the PowerPoint for a moment, because I can show you the form that we have created. Let me see, what can I share with you? Here we go. The form that we've been working on, and like I said, we've been tweaking it. This is it's really not great for showing, but oh, did I lose my screen? Oh no, it's really not great for showing, but if we can choose, I'm sorry, my screen is doing weird things for me. I don't know, but we can indicate who noted or who decided to create a documentation, and then we choose the date, and then we go in and we'll have different information here. So we're going to collect, all of the basic information, but we also want to know exactly like what kind of technological equipment was used. If possible, we want to know not just the headset, if there's a headset, not just which one you used, but which ones it's capable on. We want to collect any information regarding the company and the context of production and the artist. Anyway, this form is extremely long, and it includes a lot of qualitative and quantitative data, but essentially it's designed so that you could do a documentation of an artwork that is not necessarily something that you've experienced. But if there's enough documentation online, that's great. And then we'll have that classed with another set of documentations of people who actually experienced it and then can add their own descriptive data. And then the idea would be to have at least multiple, if we're including descriptive data, to have at least multiple documentations from different people. Big ideal, big goal would be a member of the team, somebody who is less affiliated with the project, and then somebody who is not familiar with XR works. That would be wonderful to have all of their descriptive data for this phase. But like I said, that's where this summer we're working on accumulating a bunch of the documentations, and then we're going to work on having an interface so that this is going to be consultable for the public. Other team projects, I've been working on adapting the traversals methodology that Dene developed with Stuart Moulthrop several years ago, where a user will perform an artwork. A lot of times this is used to document works that are obsolete or that can't be accessed for whatever reason, can't be accessed on the internet, and it grants some form of accessibility, but it is a very subjective form of documentation. I mean that it's very important. It's important to collect this subjective data as well. So the idea would be to do this with extended realities, interviewing the users before, during, if possible, and after, and that way we can do different things, like we can gauge their motivations for certain movements, like in choreographies of the gaze or of the body. Another example would be for empathy works. There's a big, question like, can empathy be fostered or expanded via the effective modes of an immersive experience? And a lot of us would say yes. Walking in a mile in someone else's shoes is obviously going to make me better understand and appreciate their experience. But that's actually assuming that a lot of variables are constants, and that's just bad science. So through these interviews, we're hoping to be able to collect the data that will actually be able to help us quantify and qualify these experiences and whether or not we can actually measure and promote empathy. We're working on XR literacies as well. So Nathalie Lasselle, one of the co-directors, and Marie-Michelle Grenon, who is a postdoc, are working on a definition of XR literacy. And I'll ask that you don't quote me on this because this is still in the works, but I have the translation here for you from what they've sent us a few weeks ago. So XR literacy refers to the ability to use, understand, interpret, and evaluate experiences in XR environments. General skills, cognitive, subjective, semiotic, multimodal, social, and critical, derived from a more conventional approach to literacy, and those more specific to digital technology. So technical, gestural, semio-technical, techno-literary, and techno-documentary, applied to the new experiences unique to XR. Training in XR literacy involves developing new skills, representational abilities, so spatialized multimodal arrangements, perceptual abilities, presence and immersion, sensory abilities, aesthetic, emotional, navigational abilities, movement, maneuvering, manipulation, orientation, action, usability and accessibility, interaction, human and human object, and critical and ethical skills specific to the potential of object experiences in XR. And that definition will be published, and we will also include that in our glossaries eventually. Several other members of the team, like I mentioned, there are other I'm sorry?
Just interrupt for a second. Leon asked the question, what would be an example of immersive body swapping?
An example of immersive body swapping. Now I'm drawing a huge blank on the name of this artwork, but there is an artwork that is, I'm going to try to look it up while I'm telling you about it, where you are traveling. I think it's actually called Green Book, or it's related to Green Book. Some of you might be familiar with the film that came out a few years ago. The Green Book was a guide for African Americans traveling in the South. And actually, I think that it's called Traveling While Black. And essentially, the Green Book would provide names. It was like a directory of places that were actually safe to visit, especially after hours. It would give a lot of information on things like sundown towns where Black Americans did not have the right to just like be and exist after certain hours, essentially imposing these curfews. And so this work, Traveling While Black, it takes place in the contemporary modern day, but in the Deep South, and it takes users through very banal experiences like eating in a diner. So that would be something like that. Of course, that artwork doesn't include haptic or interactive experiences. It's really from an observational point of view. But that work specifically has generated a lot of interest in recent years, and we do already have about 3 documentations included in our collection. So that would be one example for.
Alexander, there's been a couple of experiments done where people who work with those that have amputations of the leg to get them to understand what it means to be not completely ambulatory, right?
Mhm.
Without some sort of assistive technologies. It takes them through what it's like to be in that body
Mhm.
through a XR experience, a VR experience, and it helps people understand
Mhm.
better. When I was at Texas Women's University, we were using VR to help nurses understand bedside manner, right? And so, what does it mean to be in bed and not be able to speak properly, but you've got someone coming in about to put a shot in the wrong arm?
Mhm.
How do you get people to be able to understand how to be more ethical and empathetic?
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of the soft skill building is taking place in these VR spaces. Absolutely.
And
Uh,
Fabian is up.
Yeah, just briefly. So I did an experience on body swap in Paris a couple of years ago with Philippe Bertrand, and I put the link in the chat. Like anything experiential, yeah, it's hard to describe. You have to be there, you have to do the thing, and it was live body swap where we had a headset and camera, and there was somebody else 2 meters or 3 meters across from me in the room, and then I was in their body, kind of, and they were in my body, kind of. We're looking down with a camera on the headset. So that's another experience, but live. And yeah, I recommend it, and it's just very interesting.
Yeah, right. This arm on the arm. That's right, Peter. Frodo's hand is up.
Yeah, I'm wondering when it comes to XR literacy, if it matters what particular environment the person is tested in, or is it someone talking about their knowledge of XR? The reason I ask is partly for the reason we have the community here, and that is there are so many ways to be in XR. And so I wonder at this point, and I'm sure I'm wrong, but just to have something to discuss against, it's almost like talking about computer literacy, where of course a Mac person and a Unix person have completely different literacies. So how do you address that?
Thank you for the question. So, and it's really salient. Nathalie Lasselle developed an analytical set of grille d'analyse de compétences. How would I translate that? Uh,
Competencies. Competencies?
Yeah, so it's a system for analyzing the different competencies of students, of learners. And from what I know about the work that was done for this was for media, so we're speaking more generally for the internet and like you mentioned, Frode, different OS experiences. This is this is adapted often on the context of the user. So if we had school children, it would be adapted to them. If we had an adult museum visitor, it would be adapted to them. And even then, museum visitors, they really have like three categories of public that come to them. So it would be adapted based on those contexts. As far as the XR literacy, this is preliminary, like this is a preliminary definition that they've put together. But in evaluating the actual competencies of it, I think that we're already starting to identify some of the obstacles that you just mentioned, is that there are so many different ways, and not even, I mean, if we speak in practical terms, even just navigating on a menu of a different brand headset than the one that you're used to, right? So these are going to be things that would be included probably more in like a paratextual literacy. So it's not the actual literacy of the experience itself, but what you need to know about everything surrounding the experience and how to access it, but including as well was if this happens in a museum space or a gallery space, is there a mediator who's going to help you through that? Or are you just set it free in a space on your own to figure out how to access it?
Photo?
Yeah, that sounds very related to the implementation of these spaces. One of the things we're going through now is designing an interaction language for the work that we're doing for the Sloan Foundation. And we still have lots of flexibility of, should the action be through a gesture? Should it be through a menu? Should it be connected to an object, the space, or your body? How do you do multiple objects? Will you navigate through the eye, the hand, pointer, and so on? So I guess each one of them would have a different competency. So I think what you're doing is very difficult and very valuable, and it maps very well onto the kind of work of implementation. So I hope there will be a useful dialogue going forward. So thank you.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's wonderful to know too, that is you're working more on maybe the haptics, and then in this end we're working a little bit more on the interpretive. I think as far as Nathalie and Marie-Michel's focus would be, so it's definitely complementary. It would be we have to continue this dialogue even after today. Do we have any other questions about the XR literacy before I move on? Okay.
Go ahead and move on.
We have a few different researchers as well in the lab that I haven't mentioned before. So I want to take the time to talk about since we really are interdisciplinary, just talk a little bit about what these different members are doing, because especially if it resonates with what you're working on, or if you know people who are, I think it's really important to give light to these different projects. So we have Philippe Aubert-Gauthier, who's a professor at the School of Visual and Media Arts, along with Martin Lalonde, and PhD candidate Mathieu Latulippe, who work on acoustics and 3D sonor environments. And so they will actually be developing one of the devices that I mentioned was an immersive sound environment, and that would then, because it doesn't require the ocular element, could be accessible to younger audiences, but it's going to be responding directly to a need from a teacher. So probably a teacher who wants to include sound art or music in their art class. We also have Emma June Hubner, who is a professor of didactics and visual and media arts at the Université de Montréal. Just to clarify, Université du Québec à Montréal and Université de Montréal, two different universities. I know it's confusing. But she developed analytical tools for the study of museum uses of augmented reality and engagement with the publics, notably in high school students. And she also works on pedagogical methodologies and environmental contextualizations for artwork diffusion. So, Rhoda, this does go back to the question that we had about the literacies and the paratextual materials around them and access and engagement with them. Some from our graduate researchers, we have Aude de la Porte, who's a PhD student working in avatarial representations amongst youth and adolescents as aesthetic expression and also as processes of meaning making. Rosemila Larocque, who is a master's student and a full-time art teacher, working on ethical data and platforms and media literacies and pedagogies regarding online ethics. So to answer to kind of, or to swing back to the question of the different competencies of literacy, there is actually, even in media literacy or multimodal media literacy, an ethics and platform literacy and a responsibility literacy. There, Joanie Plot, who is at University of Rimouski in Lévis, works basically exclusively on this. She also, Rosemila's work also ranges from data collection by big tech to avatarial self-representation and its intersection with race, ethnicity, gender, and more. Bao Nguyen is a master's student focusing on the mental load, la charge cognitive, so cognitive load from a didactics perspective, and competencies related to immersive experiences. We have Pacifié Leclerc, a doctoral student in the studies in arts, completing a recherche intervention, a research intervention project. And this is one of the people that I mentioned. I'm sorry, I forgot who asked the question about tooling throughout our work processes. This is one of the people who does this. Pacifié regularly uses VR in her work process. Her research aims to make theoretical and practical contributions to research on the conceptualization of the récit, so another difficulty in translation. So récit is often translated to narrative. However, her question is really more about the story and not about the narration. So the récit, the narrative in VR headsets. This approach this involves the conceptualization of narrative through praxis or practice in a semiological manner done from the observer's position. And beyond a question of practice, can it be done in collaboration with actors in this field, etc. We also have Dora Claude, who is a PhD student in the same program as Pacifié and Aude, completing a practice-led research project. Dora works on the metaverse bestiary, animal figures in online social spaces accessible via virtual reality with VR chat as their field of research. Their work follows in the footsteps of Nicolas Nova's research on mythical creatures and computer science at the intersection of cryptozoology, animal studies, and game studies, and the broader goal of exploring the relationships between humans and machines. These are images from their creative work Zoosonic, which was created during a residency at Hexagram this past year. And it is a multiplayer virtual reality environment in which they organize role-playing sessions around the theme of mass extinction and animal species. Another person as well who regularly uses XR in their tooling. And then much in line with our first acts of creation, co-creation, collaboration with artists, we have Barbara Meyer, another doctoral student in the same program. Her name is really easy to remember. It literally means Barbara Best. So if that helps you remember who this is, but she will be co-creating a virtual reality artwork with Abenaki artist Melanie Obamzawin. And the main objective of this research is to contribute to enriching the knowledge of those involved in arts education about the prospects for collaboration with Indigenous artists in the context of creating a digital artwork, specifically virtual reality, from a pragmatic and experiential perspective. We have other new and forthcoming avenues this coming year, besides finally receiving the groups in our physical space when we finally get the keys. Several projects in development, including one with the Bibliothèque et Archives Nationales du Québec, the National Library and Archives of Quebec, which I mentioned earlier multiple times, where we will be implementing one of our fieldwork sites of research design to the same ends as our education acts to help facilitate, promote, integrate extended realities in the environment of cultural diffusion specific to a public national archive and library, which are not the exact same context, quite obvious, but not the exact same context as an educational classroom. So it's not simply about recycling the designs and the tools that we develop for the educational context, because the publics are quite different. We're also working with the Faculty of Health Sciences to expand our functioning in order to accommodate not just the researchers within our network and respective fields, but with a direct link to those working in health and medicine to explore potentials of therapies and interventions and training modalities offered through modalities of immersion. So much like Dene mentioned as well, the training for professionals within the health fields, but also the use of these therapies as implemented through immersive modalities. And then lastly, we're working on our exhibitions that is part of our mandate for diffusion and exhibition of the artworks. We are not limited to the classical institutional practices of repository building and archival restoration. We build and host brand new exhibitions as we've done online with NT2 for many years. For and by artists of varying degrees of familiarity with immersive technologies. As I mentioned a little bit at the beginning, we want to host artist residencies, not just for those who are simply looking for the space and the resources to realize their artworks, but also for artists who are looking to explore and master a new media art form that with which they're not familiar and provide them the technological and human resources necessary for this. So we want to not only create a path for the educational and cultural institutions of Quebec, Canada, and the world to be able to responsibly, effectively, impactfully integrate these technologies into their programs, but we want to do the same for the artistic and practice-led research communities. So that being said, we're continuing our work, meeting with people all over the world and mainly all over Canada, but we really want to expand even more. I just wanted to throw up our general contact information. The 1p1.uqam.ca is our website. It's in the works. There's very little information up there right now. We have some information about our research access, but that will be the portal to all of our information as we continue to develop it. And then laboratoire 1p1 at uqam.ca is our email address. Backstage secret, it's me. I'm the one who answers that one. So you can contact me directly, but you're also welcome to contact Laboratoire 1p1 throughout at any point in the year. It would be my pleasure to chat with you. So I'll stop my screen sharing there, but I can circle back to any of the slides if there are questions specific to them.
Yes, we have time for questions. We need to stop about 5 minutes till 10 because a lot of us are going to be heading to another meeting. So questions, comments, I want to thank you for being here today, Alexandra.
Thank you very much.
So anybody have more questions for Alexandra? And you can put them in the chat if you'd like. I'd like to say that it's really interesting to look at what you're doing and thinking about how, my particular lab has been built out.
Mm-hmm.
Came at it a different direction from you. I mean, you started head on. I mean, well, I guess we kind of started in the same direction, right? We started with anti-duh, and then the transformation to 1p1. We're starting our 15th year this coming January, and we just keep morphing, like just changing gradually in these different areas. So it's interesting to see how we've come to the same problem in these different processes.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy has a question. Are you connected at all with Sear Lab and Dr. Frank Moreau at University of Calgary?
Are we connected with the Sear Lab? No, we are not. And I am not familiar with Dr. Frank Moore. So I will thank you. Thank you for the that's another thing too, just in general, as far as in between our faculties and our departments and our programs, that's difficult, is there's a little bit of that linguistic divide here in Canada. So a lot of openness from us, but a lot of times the inverse is that people don't know that we exist. So this is great. Thank you. I'll take all the recommendations if you have other people that you would like to put us in contact with.
Leon's asking, can you tell a bit more about the artist spaces? Are they physical, digital, virtual, hybrid, perhaps?
The artist spaces, we have, besides having the actual isomorphic space in the analysis room, which would be open to artists if they would come in residency, our original plan was to also have production rooms so that we could actually have, an office just purely for production. We do have sound production equipment as well. So we have these spaces physically for, people to use just general workspaces. As far as the separate production studios right now, it's a little bit up in the air because we did have to change buildings. And so the availability of space is differently organized, but I email them regularly to remind them that it was part of our original mandate to have these spaces. So does that answer the question, or was there something more specific about our resources that we can offer?
Which building are you going to be in? So I'm familiar with your campus. So
yes. You're
Urban
familiar with
Res-
the campus, but you haven't been in the actual space. So in 2022, we moved to the other side of campus. We're on St. Catherine's in the VA building. It just stands VA, it doesn't mean anything. And we will be across the street in the R building. We'll be on the fourth floor, right next to the urban planning and development program. So still in the main central campus, we're not moving to the sciences campus, but essentially the rundown is we are in a rented building and we're moving to a building that's owned by the university.
That's good. So if you ever get to Montreal, it's a wonderful location. It's right there in the downtown area. It's walkable, lots of little hotels and
Mhm.
restaurants, and really great facilities.
Mhm. And we're very close to several museums, including the MAC, the Modern Art Museum, which is really
It's right
wonderful.
there.
Yeah.
Will you be doing any work? That brings me to the question, have you built a relationship with the museum yet to do some installation work there?
For installation work, not yet, no. What's in the works right now is specifically with the Phi Center and then with BANQ is that we want to build a repository, a communal repository, so that we could have a Montreal-based resource set that people could come consult with our equipment. And that we could freely exchange our licenses and our access to different works between the organizations. And then with Phi, what would be exciting is that then we would probably have extra time with their limited time installations that are only there for certain months. We would probably get our own time with it. So for now, it's that installation spaces. There will be it's a project called Quartier Apprenant. In which the Latin Quarter that we're in is going to host a series of different installations in and about learning, to really embody the university spirit. There's no specifics on the actual installations and what we'll have, but we will be providing the support for some AR and potentially also some VR installations. But these are the ones that are going to be outside because we want them to be accessible to the public, and by accessible freely, so walking on the sidewalk, run into something, not choosing to step into the library and archives building, which is quite big and institutional feeling. Yeah.
Question from Peter Wasilko. Do you have any collaborations with urban planning? And that's because you're next to them now, or will be. XR could be
Yeah. So for now, it's that project is the installations within, and so essentially urban planning. Her name is Priscilla Ananian, and she's a professor in urban planning. She's an architect actually, and so our idea is really more, and I'm forgetting the word in English, but it's really we come in secondarily. We're not going to be building new installations. We want them to be integrated and natural to the environment that's already there, and so that's that's what that collaboration is going to be. Possibly with some guided visits as well. We'll be having some of our graduate researchers out and collecting data on people's experiences of them, as well as guiding them through the neighborhood to the different experiences that will be installed.
And then, Rob, what do you do with driving narrative in VR?
What do we do with driving narrative in VR?
Driving the narrative, I think you mean driving the narrative, like making the narrative move forward instead of driving narrative.
Yeah, no, I pause because it's the big question. I mean, what do you do with driving narrative in written text or in any visual media? That's partly I mean, there are many answers to that, but partly I would say we would work from our fieldwork semiotics, and then which we look at in our collection, what are the tendencies for the publics? If we have choreographed the gaze in such a way, what is the success rate? If we have choreographed the movements and the motivation, can we measure the motivations of people to go interact with a specific object if that's what we're looking for? These are the things that are drivers, not just of action, but also of narrative, because there's a lot of object narrative. There's a lot of storytelling around the different environmental elements. And so it's really any of those. It's really any of those, but it could be so much more as well. I apologize for the partial answer. It's just a very big question.
Any other questions or comments for Alexandra? It's great to have devoted to this topic, this area of study. What about, are you looking at curriculum to teach at the university, starting programs and those kinds of things?
Um, there is a new program in the design school. And so for now, and there's or excuse me, a new program in the communications faculty, and then a new certificate in the design school. And so for now, rather than reinventing the rule or the reinventing the wheel, our energies are more concentrated in applying resources to the programs that are already in place and then expanding upon the coursework offerings within the departments of the PIs. So we are integrating more immersive realities, immersive technologies into the arts education and arts practices courses. And then, as far as I know, Nathalie is also doing the same in the education, in the her didactics department for including. But a lot of these, they start at the graduate level and then they eventually cycle down once they're tried and true. They cycle down into the pedagogies of the undergraduate level.
Right.
There might also be an institute eventually if we can build ourselves out into a research institute, which is, in our structure, it's like a miniature department. But that's really, really long-term goals.
Great. Peter's asking, are developing a textbook on XR and its applications. There's very bad, there's horrible XR textbooks right now. I've used two different ones, and neither one of them are wonderful. Right?
Not as an initiative inherent to us, but absolutely something that we're interested in contributing to and developing. At the moment, we just simply haven't been focusing on publishing projects because we got to get our stuff up and running. We got to get our space too as well, but absolutely of interest. Absolutely. So please do be in touch. If you have calls, we can share them. Many of our, like I said, most of us are Francophone, but many of our researchers are bilingual, really. And our questions of, glossary and vocabulary in French are, cultural heritage questions as well. So we're not, we work in English. It would be great to put those resources together and then maybe do a bilingual or a translated edition as well.
Other comments? We're looking forward to Alexandra joining us at the symposium in London this coming November. She'll be our graduate student funded fellowship, which is great. So welcome to that.
Yeah, thank you again for the very generous grant. It's much appreciated. I'm excited to,